Ask the Podcast Coach for December 30th, 2017.
Let's get ready to podcast.
It's a mild dancing. Hey, it's Saturday morning. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there from the averageguy.tv is the one and only Jim Collison. How's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you from a very frigid, I don't know about you guys, but very frigid Omaha, Nebraska. We're expecting tomorrow temperatures to be 20 below.
Ow!
Yeah, yikes. So stay inside, Omahans. Be warm. Good to have you. If you're watching the video and wondering why Dave's leaning all weird and why his angle looks different, Dave, what's going on over there?
9:30. I usually get on Facebook about an hour before the show and do a, hey, don't forget, we're coming on in an hour. And bent over to pick up my guitar, and every muscle in my back from about halfway down just went whoosh. And I thought, now my initial reaction when I do that is to go lay down and take it easy. But I know this from lots of history with this. If I lay down, I'm not getting back up. I'm going to be sitting there, and it's really hot. And I just went, you know what? I'm standing up. It doesn't hurt too much unless if I twist. So we're not going to do any chubby checker today. And I'm standing up. That's the deal, which means that occasionally I can do the old Star Trek trick, like, oh my gosh, it's an earthquake. I just shake my desk and make the camera move. But other than that, I'm feeling fine.
We're glad you didn't lay down because, we just would have had to cancel. I was wondering why I didn't see, like, usually on Facebook about 45 minutes ahead of time, I see you play and I go in and like it and that stuff. But it's like, Dave didn't advertise the podcast this morning or what's going on. Now we know.
Yeah, it was. I had picked it up earlier and figured out how to play Old Lang Syne, and went to pick it up again, and it was like, sorry, you're done for the day, buddy.
David is a good example of when we think about live, right? Live podcasting, and when you have a time, when you have a date and a time, you can't just, if we were just recording this and we were going to put it out and it wasn't going to be live, you probably would have called me and said, hey, can we record this afternoon because I can't do this right now? But when you have a live audience, you got to kind of do it regardless. So you're toughing it out. You do when you're standing. You do different things differently than when you're sitting. So like when you're sitting, you can sit pretty still. Yeah, it is hard to stay still when you're.
Yeah, I want to. And yes, thanks to the magic of ibuprofen.
Ooh, good. I was wondering if you'd taken some drugs.
I'm actually not feeling that bad. It's kicking in. So that's the good news. Let's see where we want to start. Well, Jim, we were talking something about the pre-show. Yeah. You said, we need to throw that into the actual show.
Let me throw this in real quick. So if you haven't listened to the latest episode of School Podcasting, and what number would that be, Dave? Just for
598.
So 598 as we approach 600. Towards the end of the program, Dave does a montage of because of my podcast stories. And we kind of talked about it in last week's show, but it is super, super powerful. And if you, I even think, from and this is not saying anything bad about the Messengers podcast or the Messengers movie, but Dave, I think what you did there is more powerful than that movie even. Just a string of people saying what it's meant, what the podcast has done for them, who they've gotten a chance to meet. And then at the very end, there's just a very touching moment in there. So I won't spoil it. Head out to 598 for School Podcasting if you haven't listened to it yet. And Dave, I'm going to encourage you, bust that thing out of there and make that its own YouTube video. Because I think it's if you ever wanted, someone ever asked you, why do you podcast? You play in this 7-minute clip and it's just really amazing. Now, I'm not just saying that because I'm your co-host on Ask the Podcast Coach. It was a moving moment. I was in a little bit of tears even as we got to the end there, just because I've had that. I've had a similar relationship with someone who speaks on there, and it's just powerful. So if you haven't, Dave, thanks for doing that, by the way. And if you haven't listened to it, go out there and make sure you give it a listen.
Yeah, it was. I'm actually talking about that on this week's episode of the school. Not so much that clip, but I mean, Emily did a thing where she sang her episode, and we asked her last week. It took her 4 days to learn the song. She had to write the song, and when I heard that, I was like, "Holy cow! This is not your typical kind of podcast." Kerry Green from Podcastification did an episode where he reviewed Skype, Clearfeed, I think is another Skype kind of, Zencaster, Ringer, all of them back to back to back to back to back. And at the end, I was like, that was really useful. Like, that was like, if somebody said, which one should I use? I go listen to this episode. This will, let you know, very unbiased. He was just like, this is what it was. And at the end, they both kind of said, well, this is what I like. This is what I like. But I asked him, I'm like, how long did it take you to do that? And it wasn't like 20 minutes. It was a lot of time to put into that. So it's kind of one of the things that I'm noticing, which is the bummer. It'd be great if it was like, yeah, that took me 4 hours. This took me, 4 days. This took me this. It's like, but I do a weekly show. How do I do that if I do a weekly show? I
don't think you can.
No, that's it.
And what's crazy is the radio guys, I don't think ever really thought about the episode. They just showed up because it was live. They just showed up every day and they just gave it their best every time they did it. And every once in a while they hit it, right? And you would get a highlight or something out of that. But the value that they brought, or was the consistency in great content every single day and doing the best that they could. And there's sometimes it was bad and sometimes it was good. But I think if you're going to be on a regular schedule as a podcaster, you've just got to do the best you can with the time that you have and deliver great content every time. It's just, and you're not going to hit a home run every single week. Well, maybe you will. I don't know. Maybe you'll be special enough and you will, but I don't think you can.
Well, some of that stuff comes from just getting out there and doing it. I asked, I cannot remember Seth's last name from Jacobs Media. Seth, something with an R. Really nice guy. And he's kind of the bridge between the radio world and podcasting. And he did an article on, is there a discovery problem in podcasting? And he sent out, like, I'm quoted in that article, Rob Greenlee, Todd Cochran, I think Rob Walsh is in there too. And I asked him, I go, how long did it take you to do that article? And he said, well, it really wasn't that hard for him. He goes, I just had to have people respond, but how to put it together. He goes, but really, because of all the context in that article, about 13 years, because half these people to get them to respond, he pulled on his relationships. And I was like, that's an interesting answer. I need to shut up because I'm doing the School of Podcasting on this show now. But that was an interesting take. And the same thing with interviews. Somebody goes, well, how do you get good at interviews? How do you get good at bowling? How do you get good at basketball? You got to just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. You've got to do more. You got to do more and more. But hey, Mike Moody had asked us a question in pre-show.
Yeah.
That I said we'd bring forward. He says, we have a podcasting studio in Austin, Texas. By the way, that would be awesome to have a podcasting studio in Austin, Texas, considering it's going to be 20 below here in Omaha this week. Nice. So hello to our Austin friends down there in warm Texas. He says, we are looking to hold free events for podcasters. What type of free events would you like to attend from a local studio? It's been interesting. I'm a runner, right? I do a lot of running races in the spring, summer, and fall. And lately, the races have they've added beer to the end of their beer events are always good to bring people in. Joking aside, in seriousness, it's actually beer has added a whole new element to this running thing. But Dave, what do you think? I guess Mike, kind of what are your goals? Is the goals to attract more people to come and pay to use the recording studio? Is that kind of the goal? Because I think if that's the goal, then maybe it's events where they can come in and get a chance to use it and mess with it. Maybe you have a demo day where folks can come in and record 15 minutes at a time. Dave, I don't know, when you think about having a studio and you want folks to come in and see it, what kind of events would you hold there?
That's a great question.
Open house, barbecues, beer.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
those are always good.
Because the cool thing, podcast and pizza both begin with P, so you could have kind of an open house. One of the things I want to try in 2018 is I want to contact a local library. And I'm going to try an Apple store and a Verizon store, because those are known as technology companies, to say, hey, can we set up like a monthly thing where I come in and just do a like podcasting 101, not how to podcast, but although I'll answer those questions too, but more primarily how to discover and listen to podcasts. I think we need more listeners than more, not that we don't need more podcasters. We need obviously more diversity and things like that, but just to like, hey, there's somebody here that if you have any questions about podcasting, there's a guy coming on the third Wednesday of every month, something like that. I have no idea if it would work. I have no idea if anybody would show up, but there's only one way to find out. That's to throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. And if I help 2 people, It's two more people that might tell two more people that might tell two more people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I think you could, I put this in the chat, but do a promo. I call them promo covers. They're promotions for your own podcast in that 30-second slot. So things you could have other podcasters that, if you could partner with other podcasters to have them play that on their show to promote yours, or even play it on your own show, or, but show people or let people make their own, come into the studio and help them make those 15 or 30-second spots.
There you go. Yeah. If you have any current clients, if you're brand new, that's kind of maybe you don't have any yet, but if you did have clients, have them be part of a party, come and meet so-and-so and so-and-so. And then, like you said, make a little 15, 30-second promo. It's the podcast pizza. We need another P in there.
And promotion.
Palooza. Yeah. Promotion. Yeah.
And promotion.
Yeah. Want to know about podcasting? Come on down to 103 Main Street at the, we're really awesome studios, and and then meet Jamie and Bob from the Pork and Pig show, and
right, yeah,
on fire.
Get a local podcaster who's got a big show to come down and be kind of the host to speak for 30 minutes on their program and what they're doing and some of the tips and tricks.
Yeah. So, but that's. Events are fun. I mean, any way you slice it, it's always the first one's usually kind of, we should have done that. There's always a lot of that. Didn't think about that.
You usually get more in the very first one, depending on the pent-up demand. You usually get more than you're ready for, and you didn't think about enough, and so you make up for that on the second one. But you don't get as many people to come back the second time. It's just I think it's the law of events. You gotta, there's a lot of hype on the first one, and then it dips, and then it'll come back if you keep working it. The problem is most people quit on the second one. They get that disappointing second event, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is stupid." You got to kind of live through that second and third, kind of the trough, and then it'll start picking back up again if you're doing good promotion. And
I also think you have to give yourself plenty of runway to promote it. I mean, if you think about it, at Podcast Movement, at Podfest, and also at DC, Joe Pardo's Podcast Mid-Atlantic. They announced next year's event at the event. So they basically promote that thing for a whole year, because they usually have some sort of early bird. Like if you buy today at the event, if you buy next year's ticket today, it's usually a huge discount, but they just want people to go. And it takes a year for people to go. Enough people to go, oh yeah, I'm going to that one. And then, oh really? Oh, so-and-so's going too. Oh, maybe I should go to that. So leave yourself a lot of, I would say at least 3 months. Now, the cool thing with yours, it's a local thing. So you don't have to worry about people flying in and things like that. But I would still give yourself plenty of time to build up some buzz and things like that.
Yeah. I think the power of the local event is that you actually get to spend time with people. So don't think of it. You've got to. So if you get 7 people, all 7 of them better know your name and who you were, and you better have spent 5 or 10 minutes with each of those 7 that are there, because it's important. They've spent their time coming. Just make sure you don't get so busy. I know some folks who do these things, and then they say, "Well, I'm introverted and I don't really like people." And you're like, well, then maybe you probably shouldn't be doing public events, because it's all about handshaking, and it's baby kissing and backslapping, and you got to get out there and get to know some people and have conversations with them. So just make sure if you do have people coming, you recognize them individually, and that you get to know their name and who they are. And with 7 or 10, you can actually do that in an event. You can get to know people really well.
Oh man, somebody on Facebook said, and I don't know why people do this, but it's like, answer this with a GIF. You know what I mean? And most of the time, like one was like, type in your last name and put the first GIF that comes up. It's like, okay, it's kind of fun. But this one was in one word or something like that, find a GIF that wrapped up your podcasting year. So I found a picture of Kermit and Fozzie with the meme road trip, because I did a lot of road trips this year. And it's weird because sometimes you wonder if those things pay off or not. And we also wonder about growing our audience and things like that. And I had a guy from, I think it was just called Big Podcast, the thing in Nashville. I don't want to say that was like in September, maybe October. It was a while ago, months ago, that hired me for some consulting. And I had a guy that he said a year ago came to the Northeast Ohio Podcasters Meetup. And he hired me. So a year ago, he's been sitting on this for a year. So sometimes we do things and you kind of wonder, well, did I get any, ROI on this? And sometimes it takes a year before it finally sinks in. I just saw somebody in Facebook. They, in fact, this is a good question. We've kind of talked about this before. What happens if you take a hiatus? Like, how do you start back up? So Jim, how do you start back up after doing a hiatus?
You just do it.
Yeah,
you just get going. You just start again. There's no formula. You just do it. You push play.
Yeah, he had done some in college and it had been 10 years. And he's like, I still have the website and everything like that. He's like, but how do I start back up? And we were all just kind of like, press record and talk. It's like,
just do it again.
If your audience is still there, they'll love it. And those that unsubscribe, well, but it's because his idea was, should I start a new podcast? And that's kind of like saying, I'm going to walk to Chicago. I made 20 miles there and then I quit. Should I start from my house or should I start from the 20 minutes? Well, yeah, you're always going to start from where you were. Who wants to walk those 20 miles again? So anytime you can avoid starting from scratch, I would do that unless you really enjoy going through the growing pains again.
Well, and sometimes though, there is some kind of work where it's good just to burn the thing down and start over. Like there are times when it's just good, like, hey, okay, this didn't go exactly like I thought, and let's just burn the whole work down and we'll start from scratch. But I think in most cases, you're going to want to just go from what you had. Take advantage, even if it's two. I was going to ask you this question as I was going through my stats yesterday as I was posting Home Gadget Geeks. I came across this channel that had 500 downloads for the year. And if I were to say to you, Dave, if you asked me, could I get 500 extra downloads in a year? And if I told you what it was, would you do it? Would you do it for 500 downloads?
Is that your phone?
No.
Oh, that's my iPad. Why is my
Someone's calling you.
I'm like, what?
So if I could give you 500 downloads and you just had to do one thing, would you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that was Shout Engine this year for me. And it's like I put it in one place and I advertised a little bit of it, and all of a sudden I had 500 downloads. So those things start adding up over time, and it's the Tuesday. Everyone's like, "Oh, why would you go there for 10 or 15 downloads?" Well, because at the end of the year, it's 500 extra ones,
right?
And so you kind of start thinking, maybe I should go with some of those things. So if it's working, even if it's working small, and this, back to this case. If you had just had 50 subscribers and you lost 25, you still have 25 subscribers to start with. So you should do it.
Absolutely. We should mention, if you have any questions and you want to jump on in, feel free to go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And apparently I'm just going to turn off the iPad.
It's that troll trying to get a hold of you.
And that's it.
You did $600 worth of work for me and it wasn't very good.
Well, speaking of that, let me put the link in the chat room. This is, I guess I should be honored in a way. I have a thing. I have a Google alert that lets me know when somebody puts the word School of Podcasting anywhere. And so I go into my Feedly because I have that. You can take the Google alert and say, give me an RSS for that. So I put that into my feed reader. And I go to this thing, and there's a woman from California named Lexi that says, hey, I hired Dave Jackson to do, I paid him $600. And I'm like, I don't remember that, to do coaching. And he said he'd email me after he paid me, and I never heard from him. And I'm filing a complaint here on ripoffreport.com. And I was like, holy cow. All right. So I go over and I go to register so I can say, how can I help you? Because I went over and looked at my PayPal because I'm like, $600. That's a chunk of change. And I'm like, I have nobody. $599, nothing. $600, nothing. Go into my Stripe account, nothing. Zero. Do a search for Lexi. No Lexi. And I'm like, so I go over anyway, sign up, and there's a thing that, do I still have the screenshot? I do have the screenshot here. Let's just, and I'll read this for anyone. This is going to create that cool kaleidoscope thingy.
You just created a singularity.
Yeah. Now, hopefully you have just the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it says, I'm willing to be contacted by media, a consumer advocate, lawyer, or government authority to help further my case. Send me the contact information. If a lawyer is interested in a particular case or possibly starting a class action suit, Notify me when someone files a rebuttal or consumer comment to my report. Notify me when someone files a rebuttal or consumer comment to a rebuttal. So it's like a rebuttal of the rebuttal. Blah, blah, blah. Send me email from Ripoff report about my categories of interest, special blah. So I'm like, there's a lot of lawyer talk there. And I'm like, so I unchecked most of those. And this is weird. My mouse has disappeared. It's okay. It's on the left one. Okay, there we go. That was very odd. So I went over, unchecked those, and typed a thing that said, "Hey, Lexi, I'm really sorry you had this experience. I'm not remembering you. Would love to work with you. Schoolofpodcasting.com/contact." And like every part of my spider senses was going, this isn't real, because that's just not like me to have somebody give me money and go, well, too bad. In fact, I actually refunded a guy once because he wanted a quick start and he kept changing his mind, and he had hired me and I did some things. I made some artwork for him. And then I think the holidays hit or something. And I was like, dude, we really need to get this going. And he said, oh, I worked with a friend and I'm up. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of odd. I said, well, I'm going to refund your money because, I didn't really, all I did was I make artwork for you. He goes, no, just, he's like, no, keep. I'm like, no, I offered a service. I was going to get you into iTunes and no. So I was like, I want to be able to sleep tonight. Let me give you your money back. And he's like, all right, if you want to. So this thing was really weird. So I then Googled, is Ripoff Report a ripoff? And yeah, it is basically in a nutshell. And it's according to, let me get my link here from consumeraffairs.com. It basically says that this is run by an evil person who then tries to extort money from you. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm looking forward to that. So glad I signed up. So
yeah. Well, those things happen, right? I mean, you put your name out there. How many of us podcasters get that seemingly daily? I get them almost daily now of like, hey, we want to partner with you. We want to put content on your site. We want to, those kinds of things. And I say no to most of them, but once you're out there and your stuff is public, you're going to get those kind of emails, and everything has to be treated suspiciously until proven otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we forget and get into predictions and such, we do want to say thank you to, I believe his name is Jonathan. Yes, Jonathan Bloom from weeklyawesome.com, as well as Glenn the Geek Hebert from horseradionetwork.com. I swear I quote Glenn the Geek like at least once a week to somebody. Josh Rivers from podcastingexperiments.com, Max Truscott from aviationnewstalk.com, and Shane from, check this out, Spybrary, as in SPYBRARY.com. It's a guy. Yeah, it's all about spies. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool name. So if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, simply go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Deeply appreciated. So, but yeah, Jim, we got like a day and a half left of 2017.
Where did 2017 go?
Spooky.
Just flew by. Unbelievable. I made a prediction last year on this show, right? My 2017 prediction is that more would flow out than flow in from a podcasting. I thought 2017 would be the year that we kind of tip over and people stop, the hype of having a podcast stops, and more outflow than inflow. I don't think that is true. I think that we're still pulling in more podcasts than are going out. It's hard to tell. Those numbers are hard to find. It's hard to tell who's pod faded and who hasn't. So that was my prediction. Do you remember any of yours?
I was going to go out and like, did we do a prediction show last year? I'm like,
we did sort of one. Yeah. I'm always a little hesitant on these prediction shows.
They're always like, hey, look, I got 1 out of 10 right. Look at me.
Yeah. Ross always does a nice job of compiling kind of a podcaster's predictions document. He doesn't record it, but it's a document of predictions. And so I went back and looked at what I had predicted last year. I'd use the same prediction for both shows. And I do think we're going to reach a point. We have seen pretty steady growth in podcast listening over the last, let's just say 6 or 7 years. We haven't had a year where it's backed up. And I think we're actually due for that. There at some point, it can't grow forever at this rate. I mean, there is room in the space, but going to need to plateau or it's going to need to back up a little bit. So we may see some down years coming up.
Yeah. I remember I did a prediction, and it wasn't even a prediction. It was just I went into Excel and put in all the data on podcast growth from Edison, and then just had it do I forget what you call it, but basically project what the next year was going to be. And it was like spot on. It was like we're right where, because we always grow somewhere between 2 and 4%. So if you guess like a 3% growth, you're pretty much
That's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah,
that's a pretty safe bet. Yeah, I do think it'll plateau at some point, though. We'll see a year where I think we're reaching those kinds of numbers where it's going to plateau. And then, of course, everybody will be podcasting's dead. That immediately.
I'm waiting for that one.
Immediately. As soon as we plateau, podcasting's dead. But you've plateaued at 37%. I know, it's still dead. And you're okay, well, welcome to the space. You can go back to sleep now. Is kind of these journalists, we're seeing a lot of this in the cryptocurrency space right now because it's so hot. But podcasting got hot in the summer of this year. And then everybody, like, all of a sudden they wake up like, oh, there's podcasting that's out there. And then they write these articles based on like 2 minutes worth of research. And you're like, where have you been? So I don't know. I think we are still coming to a point where the industry will back up a little bit. We'll see a little bit of decrease on it. But for 2018, I think this could be the year we get monetization from an ad revenue standpoint correct. So there's a bunch, including the guy we interviewed last week, but there's a bunch of players in there really making a run at ad revenue. So how do we do pre, post, mid, and how do we make it dynamic? Those questions have still not been answered, and I don't think anybody is doing it right for the average podcaster. And so I think the company that gets that right this year will be the winner ultimately in it. I still think we're a ways from seeing that, but I think somebody will get it this year.
Yeah, I see. I got an email. I haven't read it yet. I saw it in my inbox from AdvertiseCast. This is a place where, because there are a lot of places. I know Podbean has these resources where you can go over and list your podcast, and then sponsors can list themselves as available to sponsor your show, and you hopefully find somebody that meets your show. But every time I go over there, there's no sponsors. It's like everybody's listing their show like, hey, I'm ready for sponsors. And what's missing here are sponsors. So I have not looked at Podbean's thing yet. I've heard it's pretty cool, and I understand you don't have to use Podbean to use it. Steven has a comment here. Says, I've been thinking about it last year in the chat. He said, this is Steven from betterpodcasting.com. He said there would be a big name in media hosting. We've seen a lot of Start and End, Podiant, and what was the other one? Opinion podcasting that died. But Podcast has been mentioned by various places, including here.
Podcast.
Yeah. Still around, still not having the new iTunes tags are not right over there. I mentioned that to Matt, and he kind of went, and I have other issues with Pinecast. I don't want to have to write Markdown. Give me a WYSIWYG. As much I wish I was right, I'm questioning if there are a mainstream name yet. I think they may not be there. Yeah, I don't think Pinecast. I tried to leave for the company that shall remain nameless from last week. I've been. No, that's a whole nother story. Maybe I'll talk about.
Don't bring that up yet.
Yeah, we'll bring that up in the post show.
Yeah.
But Pinecast is okay. They're for $5, but their website's pretty ugly. They don't like for me, I'm not doing series. I'm not right. So I don't do serial, but I have episodes, but there's no way to put episode numbers in your episode on Pinecast. And I mentioned that too. I think his name is Matt. Very responsive on the support side. But their stats are okay. There are a lot of people. That's the problem. When you're used to Blueberry stats and Libsyn stats, and you go to somebody else and they're not even like they're trying to do stats in a different way. On one hand, I want to go kudos to you for being creative, but on the other hand, I really miss this, that. It's like, don't. So
it's pretty, the industry is still pretty fractured. There was, so with the guest we had on last week, that actually is a try to address all the components of it, of what we do, and they're making a run at everything. But that just kind of goes to show you how fractured the industry still is. And So I think we have a ways to go. Spreaker's making a run at it from one direction, Libsyn's making a run at it from another, Blueberry's making a run at it from a third. Then we have all these little competitors popping in, and I don't think anybody's nailed it just yet. I think we've still got a little bit of work to do before we have a holistic solution where somebody's getting it right.
Yeah. Are you doing anything weird in the background?
Are you hearing a dinging?
You know, you're getting a little choppy.
Oh, all right. Well, hold on. You keep talking, and I'll figure out what's going on here.
All right. If you have a question, again, you can always go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And the other thing I thought I would mention here is Ed in a Facebook group. He did not send this to us. Ed Neary, Neri, said, is an email list still a viable form of establishing your podcasting presence, or are there now alternatives? And that is a little bit of a head scratcher of a question. I don't know that having an email address boosts your podcast. You know, to me, that was the question that was like establishing a podcasting presence. I think what having an email address or an email list does, and this is where it goes back to, why are you podcasting? So if I'm trying to sell a book or a service or whatever, or if I just want another way to contact my audience, having an email list, you can do the MailChimp thing for free. The difference between an email list, and this, of course, assumes that people open up your email, which they don't as much anymore. You're now one click away from whatever you want them to buy or order or things like that. That's the advantage of or take action, whatever it is. It could be, support this, crowdfunding thing or whatever it is you're trying to get people to do. Whereas if you don't have it, then you're like, hey, even if you make a pretty link, and it's, askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Somebody right now is listening to this in the grocery store. They're in the dairy aisle. Somebody's on a treadmill. Somebody's walking the dog on 3rd and, 12th Street. And it's a lot to be able to go back and remember. Wait, what was it again? askthepodcastcoach.com/what? theaverageguy.tv/what?
Yeah.
So an email list, it puts that link smack dab right in front of them. That's, to me, I think the big advantage. Jim, do you do much with an email list?
I have one. I have one. I abuse it. I just don't send enough things to it, and I'm just not very good about using it. So it's maybe 65 strong. So it's not very big. But I always forget. It's one of those things. By the time I get done publishing everything to my podcast, I'm just kind of wiped out. I do the podcast Thursday night. I try to get it out Friday night. By the time it's 11 o'clock at night, I've posted everything. I've written all the show notes. I'm just exhausted, and I need to find a more efficient way to use my mailing list. Plus, my listeners, for whatever reason, not necessarily that interested in that kind of form of communication. I have found, for me, much better just one-on-one email communication with them. I get emails all the time from my listeners, and that's just responding back to them. Yep, super inefficient, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I think a lot of it may depend on, like, there was a podcast that somebody did. It was either 5 years or 100 episodes. Somebody had hit a milestone, and it was like 50 things I've learned from blah, 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 however many episodes or whatever. And I went over to his website, and he his show notes had none of them. Like, where's the list? You know what I mean? It was like, so to me, I think if I was doing something where I had a ton of links, that might inspire people to want to sign up for an email list, because they're, if it's a lot to remember or write down or whatever, things like that, if you can give that to them.
I believe in the value of it. I really do. But I have a hard time using it the way it should be used, just because it takes some planning and some preparation. And I'm not in it for that. I'm not in podcasting to grow lists. I'm in podcasting to contact or to communicate and have relationships with my listeners. So like even today, we're done here. I'm going to take a quick break at 11:30. I've had a whole bunch of my listeners say, hey, I want to dive more in on this crypto conversation that you're having on the show.
Nice.
Can we do it? And I'm like, well, I want to do it off of the show, because I'm sensitive to some of my listeners don't want to hear about this crypto stuff. So we're doing a lot of the talking about it in the post show and some of those kinds of things, just to kind of keep it out of the live show. Because you don't want to shock your audience. You don't want to all of a sudden just change formats on them overnight. That shocks them, right? So today, 11:30 Central, I'm going to do a kind of an overview of the average guy's, take on cryptocurrency, out at theaverageguy.tv/live if you want to listen in on that. But that's kind of a separate thing. And it started because a couple folks said, "Hey, can you just talk to me about it?" And I'd rather just call them individually. Hey, let's just have an individual call to get this done. It's way more effective. So I like the one-on-one connections. Speaking of one-on-one connections, how's my video doing? Did it get better? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what was going on, but
I don't either. I got a wonky server, but speaking of crypto, I've got this wonky server that is doing some crazy things right now that I'm having trouble regulating. It's consuming a whole bunch of bandwidth. So I got to get that part figured out.
Kim says, do you ever use multiple pretty links to point to the same content? All the time. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure schoolofpodcasting.com/YouTube sends you to the School of Podcasting. I use that link when I'm on YouTube. So if somebody, if I put a video up, I'm like, for more information, or if you want to sign up, schoolpodcasting.com/YouTube. So I can go and look at my pretty link and see how many people did I drive from YouTube. It depends on if I'm using something and I want to track, hey, is it worth posting on Reddit or, some other location? I'll do that and can see, well, gosh, I got, 100 clicks from YouTube and I got, 3 links from Twitter. So speaking of that, I'm ready here to announce that Instagram is dead. You know why?
Why?
Because I finally have an Instagram account. So that's usually what happens. I get on, I'm like the caboose. And everybody's like, oh, we're now going to go to Godoink. It's the new social media platform. I don't know what happened last night. I was wrapping up some stuff, going through a lot of software that I have, kind of determining like, what am I going to use in 2018? And I'm like, let's try this Instagram thing again. So I go over and I'm like, it's doing the same thing. Podcast Coach has already been used. Can't do that. Can't reset the password. I'm like, this is why I got stuck. So I'm like, hold on. Dave Jackson, there's like 50 million of them. I'm like, all right, how about School of Podcasting? Hey, that's available. I'm like, all right, let's use that. So Instagram.com/School of Podcast. Now I got to learn it. Now that's the learning curve. It's fun. It looks fun. I already made a video and things like that. So, but that, and then I don't quite get this. Somehow the minute I joined, like people were following me and I'm like, cause this is like, I don't know, 12:30 at night last night. And I'm like, so that was a little different. So,
welcome to Instagram.
Yes.
Glad to know that I don't need to follow it or pay attention to it anymore.
Yes, it'll be gone soon. Also, something that happened this year was the new iTunes stats. And we were kind of like wondering, like, where are they getting it from? Is it iTunes? There is a video of which I do not have the link to. Good job, Dave.
That's on Facebook. I think you posted it to Facebook.
Yeah, that's true. And this is what the guy says.
Reporting data begins September 19th, 2017, and is from users on iOS 11 and iTunes 12.7 or later.
There you go. So so iTunes 12 or later, iOS 11 is where that data is coming from. So, but they actually have a video.
It's getting better. The data's getting better. I've been looking at it. It's kind of helpful. And, I don't think it's the be all end all of stuff yet, but it is another tool, and if you haven't gone in and looked at it, but Podcasts Connect, right? Is that the right?
Podcast with an S, Connect, apple.com.
And there's some really good, just some good insight. I think the graphs where it starts to drop off over time and you can listen to exactly what you're saying when the graph drops, man, I think that is super helpful. Like I saw that's worth the price of admission right there. That is a fantastic use of the tool. Now, I don't think I get 30 or 40 listeners who most of my listeners are Android. So we're not going to get them. It's just not going to be there. But it's one of those things where you can, at least for the 30 or 40 that are on there, I can go in there and kind of see where they're dropped, you can look at them over time. So like, okay, are they dropping consistently at this point, or what am I saying? It's caused me, Dave, and I think maybe it was something maybe you said even in a School of Podcasting where I was it was a most recent one where I was asking for Patreon subscribers in the first 3 minutes of my show. Like, hey, if you want to support the show, you can do this. That should really be at the end, right? And I'm like, okay, because you were it was, I think, maybe the Podcast Rodeo Show or something, and somebody was like, oh, you're already asking for money and it's been 2 minutes, and I'm kind of like, do I do that? And
No,
so
but
I
that was literally like the first minute. And the other thing that drives me nuts about that, it's every church. It's every church, And to me, I don't think what you're doing is bad. Like I could see you going, hey, if you want to support the show, go to, theaverageguy.tv/Patreon, blah, 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 and do a little blurb there, because that way if somebody goes, hey, I want to do that, where was that? It's right at the beginning. But this just to me, and that's why I even said, maybe it's because I'm tired and maybe because it's yet another church show, but it's like, every church show I listen to, it's always like, buy this and you get the hanky and the, the special Pastor Bob signed, 8x5. And I'm just like, oh, it's such and for me, I get offended because I am a Christian and I'm I know. We're putting out, we're furthering that stereotype that all we want is, So,
well, but it convicted me enough. I was thinking, okay, I probably need to change my intro in some ways and not be, because I was pummeling them with a lot of little details in the very beginning, like do this and do this and do this and do this. And it was kind of like, and the feedback I've been getting from podcasters in this show and other shows that I listen to are get to the point. And so I've been timing myself to be like, okay, how fast can I get to the point in these shows?
Yeah.
And I am a guy, I talk about the weather. It's my shtick. It's what I do, right? It's part of my persona, but talk about the weather in the first part of the show. I do it purposely. It is one of the ways now I'm starting to introduce my guest. So where I'll always say, oh, it's a blustery and cold Bellevue, Nebraska. And then I'll ask the guest, hey, what, how are things in where we're going to interview this gal in New Zealand here next week.
Holy cow.
It definitely will not be blustery in New Zealand, right? This time of year. So it's an interesting point, but on those stats, you can kind of see where you're losing people. And so it's just a good tool on our Gallup podcasts. At 30 minutes, like clockwork, they drop off. I lose 15, 20, 30% at 30 minutes. Well, I'm kind of thinking most of them have a 30-minute slot in between meetings where they're listening to this. And so they get listening and then they drop off. Or they're anticipating a 30-minute webcast. That's in the business world, right? A lot of these webcasts are 30 minutes. But I wouldn't know that if I didn't have these stats. And it's just some good things to look at to say, okay, in 2018, do I need to shorten everything up to 30 minutes? It's a good question. I may not do it. I don't think I'm capable of doing it, but it's a good question.
I was freaking out because in almost every show I have, you see a bunch of dips at the very beginning. And I was like, do they not like the topic I'm in? And then Kim from Toastmasters101.net said, no, they're skipping your intro. It's the same intro every week. And I was like, oh, I feel much better now. And I'm like, that's true. Because I do the same thing. I try to, and that's one of the things I'm looking at now. And this is where this is like deep diving into like stuff you shouldn't worry about probably. But I'm trying to see if I can get to the content in a minute or a minute 30, something that would be skippable. You know what I mean? Not like a minute 40, something like make it easy to go click, and now we're to the stuff. I don't know if that's probably.
I think it's a good question. Like, I think those are things you have to try and test and see what the data says, and then make some adjustments to it. And, there'll always be listeners who are like, oh, no, I love the personal stuff, or no, keep talking, do it that way. And then there's others who are like, oh, I hate it. The problem is the longer you've been podcasting, you've weeded out the folks that hate it, right? They're gone. So they're just agreeing with you. You get an echo chamber in your own podcast. It's sometimes why your podcast won't grow, because you've collected 500 to 1,000 listeners that all love you and love your content, and they're not going to give you advice that will help your podcast grow. I think, Dave, School Podcasting, 600 episodes. I think your listeners, if you were going to try to grow beyond your current listeners, you'd have to find a way to get advice from outside your bubble.
Yeah.
Because inside it's not worth it. They're going to stay regardless of what you do. They love you, Dave. Like that's just the way it is. But if you've been going for a while, you're going to have to get outside your bubble and get some honest outside. Otherwise, your numbers won't grow. A lot of podcasters are like, why am I staying static? And I look, how many podcasts do you have? If you have 50 or more, chances are you've weeded out everybody that doesn't like your content. And if you're going to want to grow, you're going to have to take a risk and try something different.
Yeah. And trying something different, either with your content or trying something different with your marketing.
Right. Yeah.
One of the two. Speaking of having a ripple effect on things, look what you did. Emily from the Story Behind Podcast.com says, I have to thank Kim. Kim mentioned your show in the School of
My Gallup show. Yeah. The Gallup podcast that we do.
About the talking about the show on Dave's favorite show episode that was 598. And Emily says her and her husband took the StrengthsFinder test and they love it. That's another thing I discovered last night. I have my StrengthsFinder's results, which I did almost nothing with, in a Dropbox. And I was like, all right, we need to dig those back out.
You should post them on behind you so I can refer to them. I think you have Learner, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to. Do you remember?
I don't. I'd have to go dig it out.
See, there we go. We need to get you to memorize your top 5 as well, so we can have those conversations. But how fun it was, because I got a note from Emily who said, hey, I heard from Kim. I heard from Dave's podcast when Kim said,
yeah,
right. And I heard from her personally on that. Like, first of all, she said, have you listened to the most recent School Podcasting? I haven't got there yet. She's like, okay, so I heard this and it caused me to do that. And you're like, oh, that's pretty cool that we have this, you get the circle of things going on. And that, to me, that's really special.
Yeah, it was cool. You want to, I'm digging out through stuff and I'm looking at the app that I use, which I forget the iJingle. And you ready to do a little flashback from previous episodes of Ask the Podcast Coach?
Yeah, let's do it.
I forgot we did this. Do you remember?
Oh God. Is this cringe worthy?
Can you hear this?
Yes.
Lady.
Do you remember this?
Gentlemen.
It's somebody's podcast.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This is a while ago.
Oh. Woo! Yeah.
This really is someone who likes to hear their voice.
Yeah, I was like, wow. I'm like, what? I'm like, because the file name is something. It's poetry, tap, and then a bunch of numbers. And I'm like, what is this in here for? And it's like, ladies. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this now. Okay. Excellent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, apparently, I wonder how many listens those kinds of things get.
Now, here's the thing, though. I laugh at that. I also applaud it, because that guy's drawing a line in the sand. You're either going to stay or you're going to be like, I like this guy's vibe. It might take him a little longer than a minute to get to the point, but I'm like, hey, he's letting his freak flag fly. And I wonder sometimes, we were talking about that last night, that I wonder sometimes if we try to put podcasting into there's a recipe. And I think there are definitely some things you need, but I also wonder sometimes if we're like shoehorning people into acting and talking a certain way.
Yeah. It's a style, right? I mean, maybe it should be called the Hookah Podcast, but it is, it's a style. And you never know when you're going to hit on some kind of new, when John Lee Dumas started Entrepreneur on Fire, it was a new thought. I mean, it's weird to think, but we weren't, same questions, cranking them out daily. Everybody was like, whoa, now we don't even think twice about that now. But, and I won't say he started a new genre, but he certainly perfected that genre.
Yeah.
And made it work. And he took a risk on it. He did a ton of work to make that, happen. Laporte, when way back in the day, when these guys, him and John C. Dvorak and those guys were meeting in a bar and talking about tech, and it was the end of the tech TV era. And they were like, what could we do? We got to jump on this podcasting thing. In those days, no one knew it was going to be what it's going to be now. And, those guys jumped out and tried these things. And today a lot of us mimic those, but that was fairly new. So if you've got a style, I think you've got to try it and just see where it goes. You never know. Now, this style, I think for our listeners, probably not the best, Dave. No. Steven said he thought it was me at the very beginning doing the skit. When you first started playing that, that's what was racing through my head too. I'm like, oh my God, did I record this for Dave at some point? That we were trying to do something funny. You do stuff and you forget about it.
Right.
But no, that was not. Kim mentions NPR style. That's another like. Oh, yes. By the way, NPR style is not new. I mean, they've been doing this style on the radio for 20 years.
Absolutely. They've been doing that style for quite some time.
It's funny that you say that. I don't know if it sounds that way, but we overemphasize that. But Radiolab is not that way. How I Built This is not that way. Some of those shows are not.
That is true, but there are some that I said. Somebody had me listen to a podcast of theirs, and it was kind of like having somebody from the news.
Yeah.
Deliver a podcast, and it wasn't bad. It was just that everything they said definitely had sound inflection, and it always ended the sentence like this, and then they would talk about something else, and it was wonderful the way they did this, and then it was going to da da da. And so it was like, it was cool, but it was like too perfect in a way.
I think you're thinking of like Fresh Air, that style.
Yeah.
NPR's Fresh Air, because that is definitely like, it's definitely that style. But a lot of the NPR shows that I've been listening to, Guy Raz is not that way. And certainly the guys at Radiolab are not that way. And so anyways, I do like the NPR style personally. I know others that it's, like anything, it's getting super popular. And so people are all trying to do, you've even done a show that was a little NPR-esque.
Yeah. It's just a narrative style. That's really all it is. You're narrating a story. And, it's my problem is, and we talked about this, I think it was last week, how in some ways, when you become a podcaster and you start understanding how stories are built and told, it's hard to, at least for me, it's hard to kind of get lost in the story because I'm analyzing it. And I read the book, Out on a Wire, I think it is. It's bright orange. And it's this intern that spent a year with Ira Glass and NPR, and she explains their formula. And once you know the formula, because it's something like this happened, and then you won't believe it, but this happened, and oh my gosh, this happened, and then finally this happened, and this is why you should care about it. And if you listen to NPR now, you can there's the first, and then this happened, and there's the second, and then this happened, and then, so it's kind of weird because you're just waiting for it, and then it shows up. Now, it doesn't make it a bad story. It just makes it in a way comical that it's an absolute formula. But on the other hand, I just listened to Mike Rowe does, That's the Way I See It. That's the way I heard it.
That's the way I heard it.
Yeah. And somebody sent me the link to a story about It's a Wonderful Life. And his formula, it's basically from Paul Harvey, that he explains how there was this movie and it didn't do very well and it lost money at the box office. Yada. And so I know at the end of it, he's going to tell me something and I'm going to go, oh, really? That was that? But I still like the show. So I don't think there's really a problem with having a formula. In fact, in some ways, it's kind of comforting because you know what's coming and you're surprised.
We all have formulas, though, Dave. I mean, even you have a formula for school podcasting. Yep. I mean, it's a pretty consistent. Every week you do things the same way.
Yeah.
We have to have formulas. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare every week to try and, come up with a different format. They're having it very different. I think one of the things NPR does better than anybody is they're advertising their own network shows inside their current shows almost too much. I mean, I'm seeing, More Perfect show up on Radiolab because they have a common producer all the time. And I'm like, guys, I already listened to that. And I don't need to know that More Perfect is over there anymore. I'm already subscribed and listening to it, but they constantly are pimping their own podcast on their own network, which is, by the way, why you have a network. But I think maybe they're doing it a little too much. I think they should back off just a smidge.
I never understand on the radio, the drive time guy here in Cleveland, they advertise his show on his show. Like, I'm already listening. You don't really need to, was there no other advertising? They're like, we'll just put an ad. It's like the Mike Trivigiano every day, 5:30 to 7:30. But I'm like, yeah, I'm listening to it. Like, you don't have to tell me to come here. That drives me crazy. That's something that I noticed this week because it's been so cold. I keep making weird decisions. And one of them was, I left my phone at home when I went out because it was really cold out. And I was I didn't want my phone to get cold or whatever. And so then I decided to drive someplace. I'm like, I'm driving without my phone. So I had to listen to the radio. And the radio had an ad for the radio about how we reach more people than TV and, blah, blah, blah. But we reach more people, in which they probably do. But it was interesting that we're like, this is why you should advertise here.
Yeah.
And then I turned on some live TV. I rarely watch live TV. And what comes on? Hey, more and more people are advertising on these other mediums on YouTube and if you're normally advertising on TV, we're a company that can. So like all these different genres are like, this is why TV is the best advertising. This is why they're all like singing their own praises, and I'm like, that's kind of odd that either A, they're doing it now because, I would think most advertising buying for 2018 is already done. Maybe not, but it's odd that everybody's like, we're the best place to advertise. And I'm like, I just found that interesting.
I think they're feeling the pressure a little bit. And I think it's the time of the year, last minute media buys. People have money left in their budgets, starting to make, and they need to advertise. They need people to know, like, hey, you can advertise on radio, or you should advertise on TV. They are all feeling it, right? At this point in the game, a new player has come in, and they're all starting to go, okay, we should make sure we're covering every base to get everyone. And in a lot of markets, radio is still a great way to advertise.
Yeah.
It's cost effective. It reaches a local market. But what you were saying before, it's a little bit like driving into Cleveland and hearing, hey, come to Cleveland. It's great. You're like, hey, already here.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. We did a podcasters roundtable last night. We had Josh Liston from Australia and Rob Greenlee, who works with Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio, who, of course, Spreaker has a pretty global workforce. And they're saying how advertising right now is much more prominent in American podcasting than across the pond, because podcasting's lagging a little bit in growth across the pond. It's growing, but it's not all the buzz that it is over here in America at the moment. And so consequently, advertising outside of the US in podcast is also then behind, because they're kind of like, I'm not really sure what this is. Do we want to invest our money or not? So that's going to be fun to watch as things go forward. I think to see the other countries start to kick in, because I know about you, but for me, it's like the US, then it's usually either Canada or Australia is like my number 2.
Yeah. Australia pretty consistently. I get quite a few from the UK. So I get that side as well, but I get a lot from Canada. US, Canada, 1 and 2, Australia 3, England 4. That's probably the way they shake out, and then very small percentages kind of everywhere else. Here's what I find, since I'm a show that focuses in consumer goods. So, it's Home Gadget Geeks. So we're always talking about consumer products. That the disparity in pricing between the United States, Canada, and Australia is a huge problem, because we'll mention these things. Listen, consumer electronics are the cheapest in the United States.
Right.
Hands down. There's a few exceptions, not many. So we'll mention these things, and then my Canadian friends get all bitter because they're like, well, doesn't cost that here.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, sorry that, there's a conversion issue, and Canadian products are just more expensive up there. And so, and in Australia, they don't even get them. Like,
well, and then when they do, Josh said that he goes, the Australian dollar right now, he goes, just not having a good day. And
yeah. And so I have to be careful as I'm thinking about dollars and cents, and I'm thinking about advertising and talking about what I'm talking about. I do have to put a disclaimer on them sometimes that, hey guys, I know we're US centric, but that's the market that we're in, and so it's different. I had an Australian on the show for a lot of years. He would come on and represent Australia. We've since lost him, and so I only cover US for the most part. But we've had Canadian guests on before, and I like to make jokes. I'm like, okay, so basically in Canada, just take the US price and double it. Is that what we need to do? So you got to think about those kinds of things if you're a consumer-based show.
Absolutely. What is coming up on the averageguy.tv?
Yeah, so big crypto show. Speaking of that, last Thursday, we had Edward Weniger on our program. He runs Alpha Bitcoin here in the Omaha area. And so if you're into cryptocurrency, any of those kinds of things, we did a whole show around it. It's actually live right now, theaverageguy.tv.
Very cool. And this week, I will be doing the how to make WoW content is going to be the title of that. And then after that, if you haven't got it in, you got today and tomorrow, schoolofpodcasting.com/contact, episode 600, the extravaganza. I might have Mike Russell. I might hire him to do some sort of intro for me. Just to.
Can I ask my question live on the air? Briefs or boxers?
I can show you if you like. You used to be boxers. Now it's which one's the longer one?
Those are boxers.
Yeah, granny pants. Yeah, I wear granny pants now. Basically. Okay.
You said anything not related to podcast.
Anything. I'm surprised. I haven't got any kind of like, where did you lose your virginity? Nothing remotely edgy. I have a couple really good stories. So that's the good news. Some people, and some of them are really hard. By the way, if you ever think about doing this, like if you had, if money was no object, where would you go in the world? And I'm like, Ireland, no. Australia, no. Grand Canyon, no. That's a tough question for me. So that's coming up in 2 episodes. If you haven't asked one yet, get them in. AskThePodcastCoach.com/contact. And we are here next week. We'll be kicking off the new year. Yeah,
looking forward to it. First podcast of 2018.
Yeah, and I don't know why the chat room keeps asking me to reconnect. I'll have to go over back to Chatwing and tell it to reset the timeout because I don't know about you, but that's driving me crazy. But if you're here live, stick around for some post-show. I'll tell you about a weird conundrum that I'm in. And we'll see you every Saturday here, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time at AskThePodcastCoach.com/live.